You're listening to Speaking Sidemount, the podcast where we talk all things sidemount diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and sidemount diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top sidemount divers. Whether you're new to sidemount, been sidemount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things sidemount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet. Hey, welcome back to Speaking Sidemount. I'm Steve Davis. This episode is brought to you with the support of our amazing sponsor, XDEEP. I shared a post from Peter Zernick at XDEEP a couple of days ago where he shared news of yet another patent that they have been awarded, this time in China, for the innovations that they have developed and built into their new NX700 regulators. XDEEP have been massive in their support, not only of me and the Speaking Sidemount podcast, but also of many others involved in exploration projects around the world. I can't wait to try out these new rigs and look forward to what's coming next. I also want to acknowledge the support of the patrons of Speaking Sidemount, an awesome group of divers that appreciate and financially support this podcast through Patreon. Thank you to all of you for your support and the many, many messages. If you'd like to support the show, then there'll be a link on our Facebook page to Patreon where you can find all of the information. Well, it's been a while, and thanks so much to all of you for hanging in there while I work through our amazing summer season here in New Zealand. Despite the pandemic raging globally, we're living very normally here, albeit with no international travel or visitors. It's a bit surreal, to be honest, but we obviously get news from around the world, and I wish you all well if you're in a location still struggling against the virus. I'm very hopeful that the vaccines will help us, but clearly we've still got some time to go before things are back to our new normal, whatever that may be. So let's dive into this season of Speaking Sidemount. Thanks to those of you who have been suggesting guests for the show, and in particular to Stratis Kas for introducing me to Laurent Miroult. In the words of Stratis, Laurent is probably the greatest cave photographer there is. On top of being amazing as a photographer, he's an amazing person. I don't think there's another person that has traveled so much all around the world photographing caves. Well, with that introduction, how could I resist? And of course, I'd already seen many of Laurent's images in Rob Netto's book that I covered in the last episode, plus for many of the projects on which he has collaborated with Stratis, and also on Facebook. And so, in this episode, Laurent and I dive into his background and how he got into sidemount and cave diving, how he balances his career as a doctor with diving, and his training and mentoring with Rob Netto before we learn more about how Laurent captures his amazing images, his equipment, photographic process, the importance of safety when photographing caves, and his advice for aspiring cave photographers. We talk a bit about COVID and vaccines and some advice for older divers before Laurent and I share our favourite caves that we've dived and the locations that we are itching to get to once we're able to travel again. All this and much, much more in this episode of Speaking Sidemount. Laurent, welcome to Speaking Sidemount.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation.
You're most welcome. And look, it's great to have you on the show. I want to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Stratis Kas, too, because it was his suggestion that I got you on the show, and I'm really pleased that I did. Let's get started. You're renowned as a cave photographer, and I want to dive into that. But first, could you give us a little bit about your background and how you got into diving?
Actually, I started diving when I was 16, and then I had a few years of recreational diving on vacation. And now about 10 years ago, I started going into more technical diving, and including cave diving. My instructor is Rob Netto. I was very lucky to meet him because he showed me a complete new world of diving in the cave. Right now, this is only for me a hobby. I'm not a professional of the diving industry. That's important to mention.
We mentioned off mic that you're actually a doctor, a radiologist. It's great to be able to combine diving as a passion or a hobby alongside a career, isn't it?
Yes, it's very interesting because I have some vacation, and because of that, I used to be able to travel a lot because now it's getting much more complicated. Yes, we have a lot of limitation here in Belgium. We are not supposed to travel outside the country right now. So
Look, it's the same here in New Zealand. We've been very, very fortunate. I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast that we have effectively eliminated COVID-19 from the country. We just have returning New Zealanders come through a managed isolation facility, and they're, of course, allowed to come back into the country, but it's extremely controlled, and they go through a 2-week isolation period and testing and so on before they're allowed into the community. And as a result of that, we don't have any COVID at all. So we live pretty normally, including diving, which is amazing, but we can't travel either. You are allowed to leave the country if you want to, but then getting back is extremely difficult. So we're all kind of like the rest of the world waiting for the vaccine. We're a little bit down the list because we don't have people dying here. We're just starting our vaccination programs now for our border workers and health professionals and people who are more at risk. I have to wait until July or sometime towards the end of the year. It's not too bad. In the meantime, doing okay. But I'm very aware of what's going on in other parts of the world, in Europe in particular. So, all the best to you and everyone in Europe and the States and other places that are going through much tougher times than we are. Look, let's move on a bit. You mentioned Rob Neto, and to be a great underwater photographer, in my mind, you first have to be a very, very good diver or even a great diver. And I know you trained with Rob. He was my guest in episode 62. Can you share a bit about how you developed as a diver, particularly with respect to sidemount and cave diving?
Well, actually, I went from open water diver with single tank back mount to cavern diving with Rob. It was a huge discovery because it was a new world, very interesting. And then from that, it took me 3 years to get to full cave certification because I took the time. I had a lot of diving with Rob, and every time we went a little bit further in the cave, further in the way of technical diving. And there was a very important step, which was the use of Sidemount diving, because it was a request at one point. I skipped completely backmount, double set backmount diving.
Yes.
I went from single tank diving backmount to Sidemount diving. And then during my training, sometimes I took a GoPro with me, but I wasn't very happy about the results. But I kept on using it anyway. After 1 or 2 years, I met some photographer in Norway during a trip, underwater photographer, and I was amazed by the quality of what they could get underwater. So I said, maybe I could try, and maybe it would be a way to bring back memories in a different way, and also maybe a little bit less work than video processing, because the data are less work for the computer or for the diver. Yes.
Sure. So much to unpack in there. I mean, the first thing is going from single cylinder back mount to side mount. That's exactly what I did. I dived for probably 25, 30 years as a single cylinder back mount diver, diving around the world and doing very much a recreational level of diving. I became a dive master and started assistant teaching a little bit as well. But I really didn't know very much about technical diving. It was in the back of my mind that it existed. And I've mentioned a few times, it wasn't until I saw Steve Bogart's, his video, that I realized that you could dive at that level. And then, of course, I went straight to sidemount. So the same thing. I think it's a genuine path that you can take. I mean, there isn't any reason that you have to go to back mount doubles. Doesn't mean they don't have a place. There's many, great back mount doubles divers. I love some of their training, especially the GUE and others do. But the truth is that it's a genuine path if you want to go to multi-cylinder diving, to go straight to sidemount.
Yes. But I must confess that I'm also diving backmount now.
I knew
because,
that.
Sidemount is not possible everywhere. So some places you cannot get the tanks. And also right now in Belgium, sometimes in some quarries, it's much more difficult to get equipped in Sidemount. It's always possible, but maybe I'm also a little bit lazy. And when I'm too lazy, I'm going for back mount.
And look, there's nothing wrong with that. This is Speaking Sidemount, and everyone thinks I'm a complete sidemount zealot, and it's probably true. But at the same time, there is this argument of horses for courses and using the right tool for the job. And if you don't have back issues, for instance, I've met a lot of people who say, hey, look, I just can't dive back mount because my back can't handle it, or you have other issues of that nature, then there isn't any reason why you can't choose back mount if it's a better tool for you. I think I saw that you'd done some GUE training. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
I was interested in some trips on the North Sea from Belgium. Going with Dewey divers was a good option because they have a kind of good organization for those trips. And before that, I started a little bit with backmount, and then I get involved in training, which was not bad because if you want to use a backmount, maybe it's a good idea to do it in a proper way. So this was
Absolutely.
also part. And also when you are on a boat on the North Sea, sometimes it's okay, but it can be sometimes rough. And even if there is a lift on the boat, it's again a question of make things a little bit easy. But Simon is still my favorite tool because it's universal. Most of the time you can dive almost everywhere. You can get some stage diving. It's very convenient. And for the caves, for me, it's still the best option.
Absolutely.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. I think if you're primarily a cave diver, it's not even a question. And then a little bit like me, if you dive everywhere, then you just have to decide what you want to do. Last weekend, I was doing a side mount workshop for somebody who had been through GUE fundies, but her issue was just carrying the twin set on her back was too much. So tidied her up in side mount so that she could dive at a similar level that she could following GUE fundies. There isn't any reason you can't go backwards and forwards. And I agree regarding the North Sea. 2 cylinders, I don't think is a big deal, but if you want to carry a decal or a stage cylinder, then it does become pretty challenging. I agree. Yeah, all right. Then you mentioned getting into your photography and how you'd seen some great role models and examples. And I had a look at your website, cavediving.pictures, and I didn't even know that you could get that domain with the .pictures. I love it. But you had a tag at the bottom that I want to ask you about, which is live for moments you can't put into words. And to me, that describes the emotions that you experience when I look at your images. So can you tell us a bit more? Let's call it about your strategy when you're capturing images.
Yes, the goal at the beginning was just to bring memories for me. And then I started sharing the picture with Rob and with other people. But I don't like to talk too much. For me, the image is more important. It's about the feeling what you want to bring back from the dive, from the cave, the experience that you had with the divers. And I mean, it's a moment which is frozen in time. And it's great after that you can go back to the picture. And I must confess that sometimes I take a lot of pictures during a dive, but if I put all the pictures together, for me, it's a way of remembering the dive, and it's less boring than a 20 minutes video.
Well, you know, I do the same thing with video, but I cut little 3-minute ones because I agree with you. If your videos are too long, they're incredibly boring and nobody will watch them. There are exceptions to that rule. When I went to Truck Lagoon, I made a composite, what I called a documentary video of the entire thing, 16 minutes. And it was for nobody but for me. The next time I go back, these were the wrecks that I dived in this order and can see them again. And would you believe that one's got way more views than the 3-minute version? So I can't believe that people are sitting through 16 minutes of my documentary. But at the same time, I understand the feeling of wanting to capture it so that you can remember where you've been and the dives that you've done. It's just immense. When I look at your images, I see much more than that. And they don't just happen, those sort of pictures. I mean, I know that there's a mountain of work that goes into creating a special image. I mean, how do you go through that?
There are 2 different ways of going to work, I would say. The first way is just to take the camera and follow your body and just take picture whenever you want with slave strobes and pictures of the fins. That's the first way of taking picture. This is the way I'm using most of the time when I'm diving with Rob during his expedition on Cozumel Island. And then the second way is to make a scenario and then discuss with the buddies before the dive what you are going to do, where you are going to stop, and then you can start playing with backlighting, putting strobes in the cave. It's a different ways. And sometimes you can mix both ways. Also, you have to be lucky. Sometimes you get a picture you didn't expect that it would be good. And when you look closer, it's better than good. It's also being lucky. I mean, and when you do like I do, when you take a lot of picture, you end up with some stuff, I would say. Yes. And also about the details that you see on the picture and the colors, I use a lot of post-processing. I'm using Lightroom. I always try to find the right color when I compare white balance to the equipment of the diver. If the diver has a spool with orange, line, I try to go back to that if it's possible.
Yeah.
But if the diver is too far away in the cave, everything is getting blue, and then it's difficult to correct it because there is too much water. Column of water is too important. And with this post-processing, I am able to fix the white balance. I am able to increase detail with some clarity. Can also remove some edge and all that stuff. Then you end up with a picture. And for me, the most important thing is to try to get as close as possible to reality of the cave. But it's difficult because you see the cave with the light that you bring in the cave, and you can bring another kind of light and the cave will look different. The advantage of taking picture with strobes and slave strobes is that you get a lot of light, and sometimes you see much more than you would see with your eyes or with a lot of video light.
Sure. Absolutely amazing. And what sort of lenses do you use too? Sometimes it looks as if you're using, I don't know if it's a fisheye lens is the right way to describe it.
I have two different lenses. I have a wet lens, the WWL1 from Nauticam, with a Sony 28 millimeters. This is my wide angle setup. The advantage is that you don't have too much fisheye effect with angle of 130 degrees, which is interesting. But this is a wet lens, so it means when I exit the cave, if I am between two sumps, I am not able to take picture because there is always water inside. I have another setup, which is a fisheye adapter on my Sony, and also a dome. And then with this setup, I get also wide angle with some fisheye effect. But then I am able to take picture outside the cave. When I'm in the dry section, I can take picture. I just take some stuff to clean the lens, and that's it. And also I am able to make a picture with 50% water, 50% air.
Which are really nice, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
So two different kind of setup. Yes.
Super interesting. I remember when I dived in Sardinia last year, I did a dive where we dived for an hour into a cave and then did 4 hours of dry caving. And unfortunately, I lost my GoPro on that particular dive in a hydrogen sulfide layer. So I don't think it will ever be found this by some archaeologist a few hundred years from now, maybe.
Yes.
But I missed out on so much by doing that because the dry caving part of it was just immense in terms of the formations and hallocytes and so on that were there. So I really regretted that. And that can be a really exciting part of entering a cave is seeing dry sections as well as the wet, can't it?
Yes, I've seen very beautiful places when there is a mix of stone and water, like a picture in Lafinou, where you have a dry section, but there is still water. And sometimes you have water to your feet, sometimes to your chest. This mix of water and stone is, for me, right now, the best part of the experience of diving. Yes.
Yeah, sure. I know you contributed images to Rob Netto's book, The Almost Comprehensive Guide to Sidemount Diving, and you've been working, I don't even know if I can speak about Stratis's projects at the moment, because I know many of them have been held up, but I know you're working with him as well. I mean, it's almost like it's going from a hobby to a business, or do you very much keep it to the hobby side alongside your medical work?
I want to keep it as a hobby because actually I'm not allowed to make any business from my position, first of all. And also doing so, I don't have any pressure. I mean, I don't have any pressure from anyone. I do what I want. If the result is bad, it's bad. That's it. And also, it's very important for me to be able to choose my equipment. If I decide to take that, that's it. That's the way I'm working. Yes.
Yeah, it's a very comfortable way to be able to work, isn't it?
Yes.
I confess I do the same. I mean, even though I'm what I would call a professional diver, I have other businesses that I rely on for income. So it takes a huge amount of pressure off in terms of being an instructor or doing even the podcast for that matter, because then you have the beautiful situation of doing it for love rather than money, which is, I think, a great way to work if you can.
Yes. But of course, if someone has a good plan for me or a bad plan, I'm always opening my ears.
The level of your photography is definitely at the professional level, no question. So I guess that's always open to you if that's something that you wanted to do. There's not very many people around who are doing cave photography that's at the level of what I'm seeing from you. I mean, if someone was looking to get into cave photography, what advice would you give them?
Oh, it's a difficult question. Work on your buoyancy.
Mm-hmm.
But normally it should be all right if you start cave diving. Also, the techniques for finning are interesting because you want to position yourself in the cave very easily, going forward, backward, on the side, turning around without making a mess. And then you need good buddies you can rely on, because when you take picture, some part of your attention or awareness which is going away. Realize that is very important because it might get dangerous to a point. So you must have good buddies, one buddy, two buddies, one in front of you, one behind you, taking care of you, watching what you are doing. This is very important, awareness, because it can be dangerous.
Just on that point, I spoke to Natalie Gibb a long time ago. I think it was episode 18. I know she's written articles about that as well, about the danger of taking cameras into caves and overheads. And so absolutely, having a plan where you're not responsible necessarily for navigation on the dive and where you are in the cave, so that you can focus on what you're doing, makes a massive difference. And I like what you said there about having one ahead, one behind. The one ahead's navigating, the one behind's keeping an eye on you, and then you can concentrate on what you're doing.
That's very important. It's not critical in some places, like in France, in the Lot, where you have caves only like a metro. You cannot get lost. You have to pay attention to your deco, to your gas, but it's not too difficult. But some places, like in Mexico, can get very dangerous. Yes.
Sure.
But this is for the aspect of diving. But then you get to which camera are you going to use? And that's this question of money. If you are already fluent with photography outside the water, then if you can afford, I would advise to take a good camera with a capacity to go high in the ISO and also with a good dynamic range, because it makes a big difference. If you can go up in the ISO, if you have a good dynamic range, then everything is getting easy.
Yeah, and that's really a challenge, isn't it? Because it's not just the camera itself, it's also the housing. I mean, it's not just the housing, it's also the lights. And so you can spend literally thousands and thousands on each aspect of that, can't you?
Yes. If you want a very good setup, you end up with the price of a rebreather, I would say.
Yeah.
And I'm using a lot of strobes, slave strobes. Some photographers are using video lights, but strobes for me are easier to handle and give a lot of light, yes. So strobes, camera, a good camera, and be sure that you are very comfortable in the water and that you don't get lost in the cave.
I think that point to me resonates as well, because to be a cave diver, you should be very comfortable in the water and you should have great buoyancy, trim, stability, and great finning technique. But that's a given for cave diving. You're now adding another piece of equipment on top of that, which in many cases isn't small either. The camera and your lights, etc. You're carrying quite a lot of gear, and that adds another level of complexity to your diving, doesn't it?
Yes, but the camera can be big, but also you can make it neutral, and it makes things also much more better if you can get your camera neutral.
Yeah.
And when it gets big, then you cannot go everywhere with the camera. But I always say, if my camera doesn't fit, I won't fit either.
It's a good way for managing whether you should go through a restriction or not, right?
Yes.
Now, looking at your website, you've dived some of the very best caves in the world, from Florida, Mexico, the Bahamas to France, Greece, Norway, Sardinia. I mean, I've dived some of them, but it's an enormous list that you have on your site, and I'm super envious. I mean, can you share a little bit about your favorite caves?
All the caves are beautiful. It depends what you are looking for. If you are looking for formations and colors, then you should go to Abaco in the Bahamas. There are some places you start the dive, and after 5 minutes, you see so many things that I could stay there for 60 minutes. It's not a problem. Actually, it's too much information that you get. If you dive there for 1 hour or 20 minutes, you see so many things that you have brain issues. Your brain is overeating. But the caves in Norway are also very interesting because of the color. They are different from what you see usually, because of the kind of stone that you can see there. It depends what you are looking for. I said, if you are looking for the mix of light and stone and water, then in the Lot you have a lot of very nice places also. They are all different. Florida is great because it's amazing, the color of the stone and the quality of the water, the flow. So it's difficult. I would like to go back to all the places I already went because I wouldn't throw anything away.
Yeah, I understand that exactly. I get sometimes asked the same question, and it's like comparing two flowers, which is more beautiful. You just can't say they're different. And I agree. I mean, every cave's a little different. I so enjoyed going to Australia a couple of years ago. I was supposed to go back last year, but obviously couldn't. And diving Tank Cave there is so interesting, and it's so different from other caves that I've dived, and particularly the way they've laid it out. So that was amazing. I was in Sardinia and in Florida, and I know some of you've dived many of the same caves, Hole in the Wall and Jackson Blue, and I really loved Hole in the Wall. It was just such an immense cave with massive cavernous passages and some really small, very silty parts as well, and just so interesting to dive. There's a couple of really nice formations in there, although that's not really the nature of the caves there. And then Sardinia, different again, having the opportunity to do some dry caving there. So just amazing the differences. I guess you get to learn to appreciate those, and each cave has its own thing, and the beauty of being able to travel with it as well and enjoy the different cultures. Like Italy is so different from Florida, which is so different from Mexico.
Yes, because you meet people when you are diving, and every time it's very interesting to meet other people and other ways of thinking. Yes. But for my personal experience, all the dives that I did in Florida with Rob, if I take all the dives together, then it's the most important in my life of diver, because Rob showed me some amazing places. He pushed me to do things maybe I would never do, not from a dangerous point of view, from the way that you want to improve yourself and to get to discover things and to push your limit, but within safety, I would say. Yes.
Yeah, I was very impressed when I spoke to Rob, and obviously his book is immense as well. And it's exactly the right way to train in technical diving, isn't it? Where you do the training, you achieve the skill sets, you then take the skill sets into the cave environment, and then you start to just progressively extend your capabilities by just challenging yourself a little on each dive. Doesn't mean doing stupid things or silly things where you're going way beyond what you can do, but just a little push each time. And especially if you have a role model, right? If you have somebody who can show you and can go in front, for instance, that makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
Yes, it's very important. And Rob is my instructor, my mentor, and now he's a good friend because we like to share the dive now. And he came to Sardinia, he came to the lot. It was always a good time for sure. Yes.
Yeah. It's diving, isn't it? If you had to do it by yourself, I mean, I do a lot of solo diving actually, so I've got to be careful. But if you had to do it by yourself all the time, it wouldn't be the same. I mean, it's being able to share the experience. I was listening to Professor Simon Mitchell yesterday do a talk with UTD, which I'm going to cover at a later date. But, you know, one of the things Simon says is you spend so much time out of the water preparing for a dive, and then the dive itself is just a little small capsule of the overall experience. And so you need to make sure that the rest of it works for you as well, you know, whether it's the travel, the camaraderie, what I call the après diving, you know, having a beer or a wine or a coffee, whatever your thing is afterwards is super important.
Yes, and this is something that we miss right now. When we dive in Belgium, we are not allowed to gather after the dive. We are not allowed to discuss, to drink something. When the dive is done, just bye-bye. And it's okay, but you are missing something.
Yeah. Well, I think all the more that we'll appreciate it once we have all of that back again. Is the vaccination program running out through Belgium now, or?
I think now about 11% of the population above 18 has received the first shot. Yes. So it's not fantastic. We would like to get more, but this is the way it is. I don't know in France. I was vaccinated in France. Now it's about 6 weeks ago, first shot. I received the second shot because they were planning to vaccinate people working in the health sector. Above 50, and I was able to get the shot. No problem at all, I must say. But it's a little bit slow. This is not good because the virus, there are some mutations.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's a race against time, isn't it? There's already been a couple of mutations, and What I guess the fear is that at the moment it appears those mutations can be handled by the current vaccines, but of course there's always a chance that we get a mutation that is able to deal with the vaccine, and we don't want that. So I agree. I mean, certainly one thing I'm saying to everybody, there's a little bit of vaccination fear amongst even quite rational people, which I find interesting. And I just say, listen, never in the history of mankind has so much effort gone into creating a vaccine. I mean, even some of the very, very serious diseases that we have vaccines for, they were done over many, many years because there wasn't very much funding for them. And we've really put everything we've got into this one, and we need to make sure that we make it effective before it mutates and we lose the advantage that we've got.
Yes, if there is a huge mutation or something nasty, then we would have to go through the same process over and over, which is...
Yeah, it'd be horrific.
Yes, it's already too long like that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, so there's our message, and you're hearing it from a doctor, and I'm certainly no medical expert, but I am an engineer, and I do use science as the foundation of what I do in diving and also how I conduct myself outside. And so I think using the best science and making the best decisions based on that and ignoring some of the conspiracy bullshit that exists in the world at the moment is the way that I think we need to go.
Yes, there is a lot of things that are said about the vaccine which are completely stupid. It's not that I am completely confident. I would say maybe 99.9% confident, because you never know. But it's the same for all the medication that you take. Take just paracetamol, you might get into trouble with anything that you take. It's not normal. We are not supposed to take medication. We take medication because we are sick and we need them. Then you think, if I get into problem, yes, this is a risk that I want to take because I don't have the choice. Yes. Yeah,
you mentioned the natural way of things. I mean, the natural way of things is for us to get sick and maybe not make it. So that's the natural way of things. And humanity has been able to control that to a large degree through medication and medical advances. And the vaccine falls exactly under that. So I just think the alternatives is to continue living as we are, as you say. And I just don't want to comprehend that. I'd love to think that this year is the year of the vaccine. And if possible, developing some sort of herd immunity from that, reducing the opportunity for the virus to continue spreading and maybe to eradicate it. And then perhaps in 2022, we're back to diving the world. Let's see,
hopefully. Hopefully, we can travel again, yes.
I did a interview a while back with David De Bruyn, and it talked about a little bit the mines of Belgium, which just looked amazing. And I think I saw some pictures of you mine diving recently too. So tell me a little bit about what you're able to do right now in terms of local diving in Belgium.
Actually, you have a lot of mines in Belgium. The issue is that most of the time they are on private property. From this point of view, the owner of the mine is responsible if there is anything going wrong. That's very important to mention. And from that, UBS, is Belgian Union of Speleology, was granted the permission to dive in some flooded mines in Belgium. Right now, it's 4 of them. If you are a member of the UBS, you can dive those mines. But there are other places where people sometimes go for sneak diving, which is an option. Or people like Stéphane Panis, who was granted access to a flooded mine, which is usually not permitted, but it was one shot to get some documentation work of that mine, which is a fantastic opportunity. So if you want to do it the right way, then you should be a member of the UBS, and then you get access to a few of these mines, yes.
What do you have to go through to become a member?
You have to be a lead of a club of speleology, and then you have to go to some meeting that people get to know you and see that you are not completely crazy. Just a little bit.
Of course.
And then you have to follow the rules, like putting on a helmet and all that stuff. And when people start knowing you a little bit, they start diving with you from open water training to go into the mines. This is the way it's supposed to be, yes. It's not always easy. And from my point of view, the mines in Germany are bigger. I would say one mine in Belgium is very interesting, very nice, but the others, okay, it's okay, but not to compare to Germany from my point of view. Maybe someone is going to be mad at me.
That's okay. I mean, it's your opinion, so that's fine, right? And you're able to dive the German caves more easily, is that?
It's not too far away for us. It's about 3 hours and 30 minutes compared to the mine in Belgium. There is one here about 30 minutes away from my house. The mines in Germany are really big. In some places you have a lot of stuff to see in the water, like big engine and all that stuff. Yes. So it's only my opinion.
Understood. Yeah, the organisation there sounds very similar to the Cave Diving Association of Australia, which controls a lot of the caves in the Mount Gambier area in South Australia. And it's the same factors. Most of the caves are on private property and they have quite a litigious nature there as well. And yes, the landowners can be found to be responsible. And so they're very, very conscious of accidents. And there was a time there a few years ago where it looked like cave diving was going to be banned because there were so many fatal accidents, to be brutally honest. So the CDAA was formed to really gain access to and then control diving within caves. It's strict to the point of feeling like you're straitjacketed quite often, but you sort of understand why it happens. You have to go through a booking system to be able to book in caves, and you have to go through a qualification system. So you need a recognized qualification. If you're an outsider like I was, you go over there and do a crossover, and so you have to do a test dive, which includes a pressure test, which is fairly substantial. And there's a little bit of classroom work as well, really about how the system works. And then you're expected to follow the system. And if you don't, you get suspended. And so it's very strict. But I get it. And to be honest, I'm quite pleased to be diving under that sort of system when I go there, because I think it gives you the opportunity to know that everything's run correctly. And at least you know where you stand when you're accessing a particular cave.
Yes, there is one specific place where some people told us don't go there because it's dangerous. We had a meeting with engineers from the mines in Belgium, and one of them told us don't go there because it's dangerous. He explained us why it would be dangerous, and I was thinking, okay, yes. And 6 months later, there was a collapse there, the size of a football ground.
Wow.
Yes.
So that would not be a lot of fun if you happened to be in there at the time, would it?
No, it would be a big catastrophe, yes.
Yeah. So once the borders open, because I guess we can start to look forward to that maybe, what sort of places do you think you want to visit first? What's the first trip that you've got planned?
If I start with Europe, I would go to France and Sardinia. But if the borders are open at the same time for Europe and the world, I would go back to Florida for sure, yes. I really need to go back to Florida, yes.
Yeah. What's your favorite caves there? I mean, I talked about that a bit before, but around where Rob's based?
In Florida, I would say it used to be Jackson Blue, but I think Bosel now would be on my top.
What was that one? Bosel?
Bosel.
I don't know it. Where is that one?
It's a river cave close to Mariana in a state park. Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very nice. The entrance is fantastic. It's a little bit remote from the civilization. Very nice bassin. And then Sidemount cave, complete Sidemount, and a lot of different sections, very small, big passage. And it's a long dive, so you get for your money.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I did my rebreather training there with Ed Sorensen, so I thoroughly enjoyed like being able to, without staging cylinders, doing a 3-hour dive, 4-hour dive in the caves. It's just, that was the whole reason I decided to dive rebreathers. But it's just immense to be able to spend that amount of time. And I think the other thing, just being able to take your time and be super slow and enjoy. And, you know, as Ed says, without any gas stress, distance stress, time stress, that's all gone. And have you dived rebreathers as well?
I tried 4 different times, but I don't think it would be for me right now, or maybe not in the next future, because I think, first of all, it would be some training. It means I have to dive a rebreather all the time. So no more side mount, no more back mount, no more pictures for a while. Also, maybe not the best tool for my state of mind. Maybe this would be a tool if I want to do more deep dives, but it's not the case. I like to make distance. Of course, when you have a rebreather, you have some kind of security, but you still need to take a bailouts with you. And if your distance is getting big, then you need also a lot of bailouts. So voila.
Absolutely correct on every count. On the Sidewinder now, COVID sort of slowed me down quite a bit, but I'm just getting up towards 100 hours now. Probably the first 30 hours are the hardest, 30 to 40, where you're just coming to terms with what you're doing. I was very comfortable at the end of the training with Ed, but I had a big break after that because of a little bit of COVID and a little bit of not being able to find the right cylinders to dive in New Zealand. We're very restricted on cylinders here, which is just crazy. So one good thing about the Sidewinder from that perspective is carrying bailout is I've got 14 litres of bailout just with two 7-litre cylinders, which is completely side mounted. So it's a reasonable amount. And again, if I want to carry more, it's quite easy, just like I do in side mount, to put another cylinder on my left side, for instance. I'm like you too. I don't aspire to dive super deep, but I do want to go back to normoxic trimix. So I've got to do some more training, and I'm waiting for the borders to open because there's no one in New Zealand that can train what I want to do. So I am keen to do that, and I do appreciate it now, but I absolutely understand what you're saying. And I think it's quite insightful to be able to like have a look at yourself and say, hey, is this right for me or is it not? For a long time, I didn't think I would ever do it, to be brutally honest. And it was only when I was starting to bang against some limitations, particularly because helium is so expensive in New Zealand as well. So even if you want to dive past 45 meters because of the gas density, let alone narcosis, you really should be using trimix. It's starting to push me a little bit there, just not deep, but just to 65, 70 meters, which is starting to get into hypoxic. So there's another course to do. But the bottom line is that was part of the pressure for me. And then the other one was going longer in caves without having to stage a lot of cylinders. Yeah, everyone's got to choose their own path. And there's a lot of diving that you can easily do open circuit.
Yes, for sure, yes. Because when you start with rebreathers, it opens a new world to you, but it depends on how you use your rebreather. You can get into more difficult dives, more dangerous.
Yes.
Also, you will have the temptation to do more complicated stuff, I would say. Maybe it's a wrong.
Well, you've got to have a very detailed mind, and you've got to be prepared for holding yourself to account to never take shortcuts. First and foremost, using checklists to build your unit, using checklists before you get in the water. And then when you're in the water, you always need to know your partial pressure of oxygen. And if for any reason you don't trust your rebreather anymore, then you have to get off it or take the appropriate action if you're experiencing an issue. And the course, just like any type of diving, it's not a matter of if you'll have an issue, it's when you'll have an issue. So practicing and training. So that discipline, certainly for cave diving, you still need the discipline. It just adds another level of that, another layer. And I have to admit that's something that I actually enjoy it, to be honest. So it kind of suits my personality a little bit. Here's the thing too. Last weekend, I was teaching a side mount workshop and going back to open circuit. And I just so enjoyed how simple it was getting ready to get in the water, how fast it was to get in the water, how fast it was to get out again. When I got back to the dive center, I didn't have to break down my unit. I didn't have to think about when am I going to rebuild it for tomorrow. It was straight in, straight out. And of course, yes, you still need equipment discipline, but it is a lot simpler. It can be happy days as well, can't it?
Yes. My goal right now is not to go deep. I would like to do more dive between sumps. Sump diving, I must invest some time in some techniques for speleology, like using ropes. And this is now the way I want to invest my time in taking picture, but using ropes and going from one sump to the other sump. And I think it's time to do it before I get too old.
I should show you a little video from my single ropes course I did in Mount Gambier. I made a climb out of a hole look incredibly difficult. It would have just about put anybody off from ever doing it. And I'm sure it was all me. I'm sure it's much simpler than I was trying to make it, but that was enough to put me off, that's for sure.
Yes, I always did like this. I wanted to go there. So what am I supposed to do to get there? And I say, okay, I must do that and that and that. But when it comes to rebreather, I say, will I ever go to the end of the wrestle in France? No, for sure. It's too far away. Even with a rebreather, it's getting too much for me. So I prefer to do some stuff like that and take picture. And maybe when I am 65 and I just do open water diver, maybe I will try again rebreather diving. But it's not for me right now.
We may be similar ages, I'm not sure. But I think it is interesting as you get a little older, you kind of do have to decide what you want to do, what you don't want to do. One of the great things, of course, is that you tend to have the resources to be able to do what you want to do. Money isn't usually not so much of the barrier as saying, hey, I've got this amount of time left in my diving career. I can only dive till I'm probably 90. So that only leaves 40 years of diving or so. Well, for me, 30 years of diving. So what are we going to do in that time? And for me, I decided that I'm not looking to go deeper than 100 meters. In fact, probably not 80 meters, but I do want to explore that area and there. I'm not going to go pushing massive grinder restrictions for 25 meters or anything. I don't mind doing a small one. So you make little decisions. Say, this is the boundaries around my diving, and then look for places that are super interesting to dive. And as I said, when I looked at your list, it was just immense. Are there some places that you haven't been that you think you want to go?
Yes, yes, for sure. I would like to go to Spain, to Cueva del Agua, also Azul. I would like to go back to Sardinia because I went only one time and the conditions were not optimal. So I really need to go back to see the cave with a good visibility. I would like to go back to Greece. Stratis, hello.
Yes, he's listening.
I would like to go back to Norway because I still have some appetite for the cave there. Mexico, yes, Mexico is endless.
So many caves there and so many different areas being opened up at the moment as well.
And some places also in France, because I always go to the Lot, because in the Lot you have a lot of caves. But there are other places in France where I would like to go. And hopefully I get some invitation to take pictures in some cool caves, yes.
I'm sure you will. I mean, that was one of my questions. You must have an immense list of divers lining up to dive with you because...
No, I don't.
I've seen the photos you've taken of Rob and of Brian K. Cook and others. And I mean, you make those guys look good. I mean, they are good anyhow. But...
They're very good. The picture always tells the truth.
For that moment in time. I love doing that for video too. And I say that video doesn't lie, but of course you edit out the bad bits and make sure that everyone looks amazing. I was just thinking through as we were discussing there my own list, and I've spoken to Brian on Speaking Sidemount twice, and both times it just sounds immense. I think for my list, that's certainly on the top. Absolutely Sardinia again. I so enjoyed it. Not just the caves themselves. Caves are amazing, but again, Calagonona is just such a nice place. And the culture's so nice. The food is nice. The weather's nice. The ocean is beautiful. It's just a great place to visit.
For sure.
And then I've dived Cave del Agua and absolutely put that on your list. It's another great cave, very interesting because it's a thermal cave. So the water's extremely warm, unbelievably salty. So it tests you a little bit. But it's the only cave there. So that's the only thing. There's one cave to dive, but there's plenty of diving to do in it. And again, out of the water, it's such a cool place to visit.
Yeah,
it's on the coast. So yeah, beautiful. I'd like to go back there, but I think there's some more diving in Florida that I can do as well. Back to Australia. There in the desert in what's called the Nullarbor, there's a massive series of caves there, but it's very much expedition, although it's kind of organized expedition, if you like, but it's a 24-hour drive, would you believe, across the desert to get to the Nullarbor. And then there's cave systems and you have to take everything you need with you. The only thing to realize too is you're a long way from supply line. So you have to be very, very safe because if you have an accident or a problem, there really isn't any help nearby. But again, the cave systems are amazing. And there's a few there that I'd love to have a look at some point. Very different from most of the cave diving you see.
Yes, but Abaco is really worth the trip for sure, yes.
And I'd love to support Brian too. I mean, that guy's been through a very tough time with the hurricane and then COVID. You know. If anyone can support him, if you can get there, then I think it's worthwhile. Thank you very much for your time. I so enjoyed talking to you, learning more about your cave photography and your diving. And as I said, I'm so envious of the list of dives that you've done. If anyone is looking to check out Laurent's images, just go to cavediving.pictures is the website. And there's images from caves all around the world there. And when I say images, they're absolutely fantastic. And if you wanted a list of caves to visit in the world, then there's a great list to get started with as well. Thank you very, very much. And I hope that maybe we can catch up in one of the cave diving areas. Maybe, again, I promised David I'd come to Belgium sometime and have a look at those mines.
If you ever come to Belgium, let me know. And if you ever go to the Lot, let me know also.
Or Sardinia. There's a conference there this October, which I really hope can be pulled off, called Flow, that Stratis helped organize. And I was supposed to be speaking at that conference. I really, really do hope that can proceed. And if that's the case, then there's an opportunity as well in October of this year.
We cross fingers. I wouldn't bet on that, but it's not easy to be sure that it would be okay to travel to Sardinia, even in October. But I hope so, yes. But if you come to Europe anytime, just let me know.
Will do. A pleasure. Thanks again.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
Hey, thanks so much for joining me on this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did making it. It was amazing to meet and catch up with Laurent and learn more about how he got into diving and cave diving, his mentoring with Rob Neto, his process and strategies for taking just brilliant cave images. And then it was great to be able to share some about our favorite caves around the world and where we'd like to visit in the future. Thanks so much for your support and for listening. Again, if you'd like to support the show through Patreon, please go to www.patreon.com/speakingsidemount. There you'll find all of the information about how you can support the show. And of course, big thanks again to XDEEP for their continuing support of Speaking Sidemount. It makes everything you've just listened to possible. Thank you all, and we'll catch you in the next episode. You've been listening to Speaking Sidemount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a 5-star review. If there's something you'd like us to cover on the show, then let us know via our Facebook page listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us on our next episode of Speaking Sidemount.